Welcome back to the channel and welcome back AFG to making videos. I just recorded the vintage collection market update for this week, and this is the second video that I am making for this week after being back from vacation. So good to be back with you guys, and to my Patreon supporters as well as one YouTube super provider, I gave you guys a shout out in the vintage collection market update for this week. So thank you guys for your patience while I was gone on vacation, but really good to be back with you guys. And while I was gone, Hakes had an online auction number 1036 that went on and closed while I was away. So I wanted to get this video out here. I didn't cover everything. Obviously, there was a lot of mid-grade type items in this auction lot, collector friendly, if you will. And I'm sure that we're going to have another session from the Jeff Jacobs collection coming up next at Hakes. I haven't looked to see when that's coming, but I assume probably sometime in July would be my guess. But there were some good deals in this auction. There were some that kind of left me scratching my head a little bit. Maybe you guys can comment as you're leaving me a like with your thoughts on anything that you picked up. But these collector-friendly auctions, there can be some really good deals in here. And I just picked out a random assortment, but there were a few posters that sold. This is a fourth printing of the original Star Wars film poster style A, the style that we know and love. Again, it was a fourth printing. It had some defects to the poster, but awfully cool to see this poster. And that value code was 200 to 400. It sold for 551. After the 18% buyer's premium. All of the prices I'm going to include the buyer's premium. And, you know, they included some defects like pinholes and things like that in the auction description. So even in that condition, it still sold for $551. There was an ESB advance poster. So this is before they had the date lined up for the actual release of The Empire Strikes Back. Pretty cool poster, a little bit different than the one we're used to with Han and Leia kissing and some of the other stuff going on in the background. But this is just Darth Vader's head, very menacing look there. Pretty cool. The Star Wars saga continues, and it says coming to your galaxy this summer. So this is called an advance poster. Value code was 100 to 200. That one sold for 373. So that just shows you there's a lot of demand for a lot of these early vintage posters. And there were some other ones as well from the Return of the Jedi. There were some loose figures. Here was an AFA 80 new case style snaggletooth. This one had the toe dent. Obviously some slight discoloration to the torso. Value code was 400 to 700. That one sold for 708. Kind of right in line with what you'd expect for an AFA 80 blue snags. There were some pretty awesome mint on cards. Obviously some of the grades weren't as high, but you're still talking about a double telescoping saber Luke Farm Boy AFA 60 archival case 12 back C. So obviously the double telescoping saber Luke also came on the AF, on the 12 back A, and we did see a very high grade AFA example in the Jeff Jacobs collection that sold for huge money. This one had a value code of 5 to 10,000 and sold for $88.35. So again, you're talking about a mint on card, double telescoping saber, even in an AFA 60. Is that right? Probably about right. A high grade AFA 85 figure is probably in that 2,500 range, somewhere in that ballpark, maybe $3,000 at the top end. So you get one mint on card for $88.35, and that's kind of a really good value grail, so to speak, for somebody there, and certainly a lot more affordable than some of the other examples we've seen sell recently. This one maybe had me scratching my head a little bit. This was a 12-back B Darth Vader with some frosting to the head, as you can see there. It did get a 75 sub-score for the figure, so it's kind of accounted for. To me, probably wouldn't spend $15.67 on this personally. I feel like that's maybe a little bit expensive just given the frosting to the head there. I mean, the figure's the most important part to me when it comes to the presentation. And obviously if the blister's still clear. But to me, I probably wouldn't spend that kind of money. I think you can get a 12-back B Vader pretty easily that presents a lot nicer for that amount of money. But again, you're talking to somebody that doesn't know 12 backs very well. On the other end of the spectrum, here was a 20 back A Sand People, no staining to the cape, AFA 80 Plus, and that sold for $671. I'm not sure why the value code was only $100 to $200. Strange value code there. That seems way too low given what this was. Again, I didn't see any staining to the cape. Maybe I'm wrong there. Let's see. I think that this is just shadows right here on the left lapel there. There's no mention of the staining to the cape there. So I'm assuming that that cape is not stained. And in which case, a $671 sales price, that to me feels like a really good deal for an unpunched, no price sticker, clear blister 20 back A. That presents very nicely. Here was another one that kind of left me scratching my head. This was a 31 back B Luke Farm Boy, obviously the walking photo, but it was only an AFA 70. Value code seemed right to me at $700 to $1,000. Chris had one of these for sale on Rogue 5 Toys in very similar grade, if not even higher grade. It might have been a 75. I can't remember, but I think it was a 70. Exact same item, and we couldn't give it away at like $850. And this one sold for $1689. $1689. That just seems like an insanely high price to me for a 70 grade. Admittedly, it's an early Luke Bespin, but it's not that hard to find this particular card back. It got the 70 because of the tear around the hang tab there, I'm assuming. I didn't really see much else wrong with it. The clear blister's nice, but it's got the overall 70 grade. $1689 is what I'd pay for like an 80 or an 80 plus. That's a huge number for the grade. Here was a good deal. I thought this was a 32B Hoth Snow Trooper AFA 80 punched example with the price sticker, but it sold for $600, which a great deal. Value code was right on the money. I would have said, you know, if this was at auction and someone asked me what it's going to end for, I would have said probably close to $1,000. And this one only sold for $600, an absolute bargain for what that was. Beautiful clear blister, really, really clean example. 80, 85, 85 were the sub-scores. Somebody got a great deal on that. That to me feels like a great deal. Here was the red-haired Leia Hoth AFA 75 that sold for $908. A big number. 41 back A. I think this is the debut card. Clear blister. Punched example, though, with the price sticker. And, again, it's only a 75 grade only. You know, that to me feels maybe a little high, but not terribly so. I think I had a CAS 85 that I didn't sell for much more than this. So it might have been closer to $1,000. I can't remember what the sales price was that I had on mine, but AFA 75, red-haired version of the Leia Hoth 908. I mean, it's not a terrible overpay. It's not like the Luke Bespin, but that does feel like a big number. This was another huge number, but I didn't really have a gauge as to what this one would sell for. I had no idea. It was only a 50 grade for Luke Bespin, but it's the orange-haired version of Luke Bespin. A true orange hair, not the mustard, not the kind of, you know, mustardy brown. This is like the bright orange hair. And that one sold for $1504, a good 50% above the high end of the value code. But again, mint on card, it's tough to gauge what this would sell for. I think Chris sold an AFA 85 loose graded figure, orange hair Luke Bespin, for around $700, if memory serves. So again, it's mint on card. It's selling for about double that, 2.5 times, you know, two times and change. So, you know, I guess that's about right. But, you know, when you think of orange-haired Lukes, you think of the Luke Farm Boy. We all know how expensive that one is, mint on card. And even loose graded, it can be $3,000 plus. But this is one I just had not seen mint on card before, and clearly the market decided that it was an expensive figure. Here was the debut card for the AT-AT driver, graded AFA 75 plus. An unpunched example with the price sticker, but clear blister and the debut card for the AT-AT driver in a 75 plus grade. That's nothing to sneeze at, and it sold for $454, which is a great deal. A great deal. That's the lower end of the value code. In higher grade, I've seen these very consistently go for 4 figures. So I thought that was a very good deal as well for somebody. And again, you know, this comes down to budget friendly. These are never going to get the super high prices like we see at the Jeff Jacobs collection, right? That is a different market, a different stratosphere, a different buyer, if you will. And for the collectors out there, you know, these are collector friendly, and the prices did reflect that for the most part. This was a 41E C3PO, a very common one that we see all the time on eBay. And even still, that one sold for $527, which is a great deal for an AFA 80. Note the 75 subscore, though. You know, again, a lot of people shy away when they see those 75 subscores, but it got the overall 80. punched example, 526 is a very solid number. If I was the buyer on this one, I'd be very comfortable at that price that I could get my money out of it one day. Another great deal was this CAS 80 Plus baggie for the Hoff Snow Trooper. Again, I know baggies are not everybody's cup of tea, but the Hoff Snow Trooper baggie is a very tough one to get. And this is a price $194.70 after the buyer's premium. I mean, that price should be what they sell for ungraded, and if not more. I mean, typically a Hoff Snow Trooper baggie, I'd say $350 all day long ungraded. So that just shows you that baggies, it's a very select market. And I've noticed that myself when I've been reselling some of my graded baggies, is that they tend to sit unless they're very rare or very high grade. Some of mine sell instantaneously, like my Clipper catalog mail away Darth Vader that I sold at a very fair price, admittedly. I mean, I sold it for about 25% less than what Chris sold the last one for several years ago. I sold mine at $750. Chris sold his last one at $1,000, and they were both AFA 80, or mine was an AFA 85, his was a CAS 85. But then I have other ones where I expect them to sell and then they sit. So you just don't know. But baggies are definitely an acquired taste. And I would be cautious spending too much money on baggies unless you just love the baggies. If you love the baggies, go for it. But just note that my experience has been reselling my 25 to 40-ish baggies that I had graded, that those tend to sit and they tend to go for below fair market value just because most people don't care. So that's been my experience. And I think this one supports that thesis that graded baggies, even for rare character baggies, people just don't care. Next up is a yellowed blister 47 back Luke X-Wing, kind of a tough one to locate. That one sold for $394, AFA 75 plus. Again, a yellowed blister, very slightly yellowed, but again, a very fair price, I thought, for an ESB Luke X-Wing. We had a clear blister Yoda with the brown snake, AFA 75. Brown snake Yodas on ESB card backs are particularly difficult to find just because they were transitioning over from the original 32B debut card, which had the orange snake, and then they kind of were transitioning over. Most of the brown snake Yodas are found on Return of the Jedi card back. So again, this is not an easy one to locate, and to get it for $649, admittedly, it's only a 75 grade, but again, it's a clear blister. I thought that was a great deal. Really, really good deal there. We had a very slightly... No, this is a clear blister. I apologize. This is a clear blister Bosk on the 47 back. Another extremely difficult one to get. And, we just saw an AFA 85 that sold for 4 figures, like $1,300 plus in the Jeff Jacobs collection. This was an AFA 75 plus. Again, nothing to sneeze at. And it's a very tough one to locate. I looked for one of these for a very long time and never did get one. And in clear blister for $454, a great deal for somebody on that one. So I hope that one of y'all were able to get that. That's a great deal. Next up, man, some of the Forloms sold for big money. And again, this is a testament to when big money collectors want those AFA 85s, they will stop at nothing to acquire it. And this is a big number. $1,653 for an AFA 85, poor man's debut card for Forlom, the 48C. Obviously, we saw the 48 back A that Jeff Jacobs had in low grade that sold for a massive number. I can't remember the number, like $4,000 plus. This one sold for $1,653 though. That's a huge number, a huge number. So surprised it went that high, to be honest with you. I thought the value code was spot on the money, if not maybe a little low. I could have seen maybe $1,200, but I was not expecting $1,653. That was a huge number. Likewise, here was the AFA 85 for the same card. Now it had the big ugly Toys R Us price sticker, but it was unpunched. That one still sold for $843. That's a number that's kind of in line with market to me. But, that's a huge disparity between the 80 plus and the 85 with no price sticker. You're paying double for it, just going from an 80 plus to an 85. But that just shows you the power of those 85 grades. Next up, again, another one. This is the Zuckuss on the 48C 75 grade that sold for $324.50. Clear blister punched example with that ugly Toys R Us price sticker. Great deal though at $324. The AT-AT driver, again, this was ungraded, and a lot of the ungraded went for pretty good deals. This is a slightly yellow blister on the 48A. a tough one to get a hold of. The Alphaless 48As are very tough to get. And that one sold for $402, which I thought was more than fair, accounting for the yellowed blister. Not a lot of Return of the Jedis I wanted to talk about, except for this molded face Luke Jedi. This one had the cape inside the bag, inside the blister. So that's a tough one to get, the molded face Luke. This is on the 65 back A Taiwan COO 75 grade that sold for $573. Really good deal there. High grade, loose graded molded face Lukes can go for $400, $350 to $400, I'd say right now, maybe $450 at the tops. So to get a mint on card molded face Luke with the cape in the bag, man, that is an awesome deal for a 75 grade at $573. The Luke Gunner card, this one had ink touch-up to the card, and it still sold for $1,601. Absolute insanity. There's no way I'd pay that number. No offense if you happen to be the one that bought this, but it had pin-sized dots and sticker removal and ink touch-up to this Luke alternate image card, the Luke Gunner card. $1,601, I mean, we've seen some graded examples in 75 to 80 grade go for about this price. So I don't know why this one sold for $1,601 when you can get a graded one without ink touch-up, without pinholes in the card for that price, or maybe slightly more, you know, $1,800, maybe tops $2,000. But, you know, I was thinking 1,000-ish, maybe 1,200. $1,601 is too high. That's not a price I'd pay. AFA 85 Luke Battle Poncho sold for $650. I thought that was a very fair price for an unpunched, beautiful example. Just light yellowing, light-ish to moderate yellowing. But it was an AFA 85, 80, 85, 90 were the sub-scores, and to get that for $650, good deal there. And then finally, this was another one. I wasn't sure where it was going to end up. This was a Power of the Force Kenner Canada Yak Face AFA 50. Now, we remember that the AFA 90 that Jeff Jacobs just sold, I forgot what it sold for, but it was in that four-figure category. It was like, or five-figure, excuse me, category. It was like $13,000 if memory serves. Again, I'm going on memory, but it was an AFA 90 old label with just one number. This one had the sub-scores, but it was only an AFA 50 archival case, unpunched, no price sticker. The value code was 2 to 5, and I would say that's probably about right. But we just saw an AFA 85 that sold on eBay down in Australia for like $8-ish grand. And that's looking more and more like an absolute bargain, given that this AFA 50 just sold for $5,000. So you don't know what's ever going to happen in these auctions, but some interesting sales overall. Some really good deals in this auction overall. Great job by Hakes again. Thank you, as always, for watching. Don't forget to leave me a like if you enjoy the content. Thanks again, and I'll be back soon.